And I see, as you're telling this story, Mitch and Sonia have both found the stream, which is awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, which is excellent. So I think at this point we can go ahead and get started, and we will just hopefully have the others come join us very soon. So, Mr. Stephen Kehner, for those of us who don't know you, how about we start with an introduction? Because I've known you for years, but not everyone has. Some people are meeting you for the first time. So how about you give us a little bit of an overview of where you play, what your role is with the orchestra, and when you guys expect to get back on stage.
Yeah, so I just got this job with the Oregon Symphony. I'm assistant principal percussion. Yep. And the audition was February 2020. So about a month and change before everything went upside down. Yeah. So very fortunate, very lucky that audition got done when it did. Yeah. Because if it, had been a few months later, it probably never would have happened. Right. So I feel very fortunate for that. But unfortunately, just with the circumstances of the restrictions here in Oregon, and a lot of extenuating circumstances surrounding the orchestra and who owns the hall and who makes the rules, et cetera, our season was basically completely lost. The 20 to 21 season was fully canceled. So we had a number of digital projects that the orchestra put together, a really successful educational series called Symphony Story Times. Check that out. They're all up on YouTube, totally free to watch. Amazing for kids. It's reading a book with a musical accompaniment. Super cool idea. I haven't got to do one yet, but I really hope to soon, especially having a little one at home. So those are really cool. And then just some projects too for essential workers, trying to, shine a light on them and thank them for everything they've done. And a big gala, which we had a big percussion ensemble performance of an Andy Akiho piece for that. Called Pillar 4. That's an awesome piece. Sandbox Percussion is getting ready to put their recording together of that, and it'll be very cool looking and very amazing sounding from the little bits that I've heard of it so far, just to study for our performance. So very cool piece by Andy. He's a great friend of the orchestra and the percussion section here. So really cool to have Andy Akiho around too. So yeah, I have really liked it here. And I'm very excited to be settled here and just, looking forward to our plan is in September, things will get going again. It looks like actually this week Oregon's mask mandate might be finally lifted, and there'll be no more gathering restrictions and things like that, just based on our vaccination numbers. So I think by the fall, we'll be up and running, and we have a great season planned, and I'm just super excited to get into it. Just having the long delay in between the audition and actually starting. So
right. Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of excitement. A lot of that ability to sort of be at rest for a long time and then turn it right back on is like a skill that you've developed over the years. And it's something that you're going to be using again very soon. But before we get into sort of that ability to just jumpstart and recommit, which is what this class is all about today, I want to ask you, before this Oregon audition, how many auditions had you taken? And maybe you could tell us a couple, or maybe just one, fun story from an audition that maybe didn't go your best.
Yeah, totally. A very common question, and very, especially I feel like that question was really in my brain when I was a late undergrad, early grad student, starting to look at taking my first auditions. And I remember at one point even asking my teacher, how many auditions did you take? Just kind of what am I getting into here? I didn't know. Right. Is this a couple year thing? Is this how long does this take? And it's just funny because I think at that age, I was hyper focused on that. You start taking them and you go, well, that was my first one. You do another one. Well, that didn't work out. That was my second one. And then it kind of just keeps snowballing from there. And so I think at some point early on, I realized, okay, this is going to take a while. And everybody's path is different. I know people who won their first or second audition, and I know people who took 30, 40 plus. So, okay, now I understand. It's just, there's no, you should have a job by X number. That doesn't exist.
Exactly.
So that was, I didn't know that right off the bat. So at that moment I said, okay, I'm not going to count.
Sure,
and then
yeah,
I said,
absolutely.
if I'm fortunate enough to win one, maybe I'll go back and see how many it took. So that's kind of where I ended up with it. And so actually after the Oregon audition ended, I did go back, and I think it was 36.
Wow.
Was my number. And I was counting, like, I took the New World Symphony audition a couple of times, and some other, training orchestras of that kind, Civic Orchestra and Hyogo in Japan, things like that.
Yeah.
Things where I would have had to move there and live there and play the job full time. I was like, that counts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're familiar. So that was kind of my parameter for how I counted them. Yeah. So, and that was, and it's also not to say that the first 35 were a failure and the last one was a success. I did win a New World audition to get a fellowship in there. And then I won a 1-year position with the Utah Symphony, which is where I was before here, which is a very small audition, just like 10 people or so that they invited, just to do a sabbatical replacement for someone in their orchestra who's taking a year off.
Right.
So I was very fortunate to get that. And so there were actually 3 successes in there. But yeah, so that's kind of where it ended up for me. And I just look back on that, and it kind of just shows me like how crazy of a journey it is. As far as like one, like kind of a funny one or something from early on, I think one of the first big ones I took was the San Diego Symphony, which is there's a couple, for those of you who may be just getting started with this or are just learning about it. Some auditions are what we call cattle call, which is where anybody can show up. You can send a resume in and you can come in and play, and they have to hear you. If you want to come play, they have to hear you. So there's a few orchestras like that. Chicago Symphony, Detroit, San Diego is one of these. So as an early, grad student with virtually nothing on my resume, that was a perfect one for me. It's like, I'm going to go for that one because they have to hear me no matter what.
Right.
Was super, very prepared, did my absolute best, and made the semifinals. Oh, wow. Okay, great. Like they liked me enough to advance me into the semifinals. I was horribly unprepared in the semifinals and was not even close. I don't think I even finished my round. It was not. It was clear. I was like, okay, I'm just happy to make a cut. Cool. So my next audition, I want to say, was for the Navy Band in Washington, D.C. And I took a number of those military band auditions. A little bit of a different scenario with those. But the Navy Band one, I think, was just a couple months later. And so I was feeling pretty good about myself. Oh, yeah. I made the semifinals for the San Diego Symphony. So Navy Band, I'm going to be right there. Like, I could get this one. Sure. And I went in. I thought I played a great prelim round. I was like feeling really good. Like, yep, that's going to get me through. Like, that's, nope. Thank you for coming, and enjoy Washington, D.C. And we, will not be interested in your services. So there you go. So that was just a big lesson to me. It's like, okay, this doesn't, just because I did something in one audition a few months ago, that's right. That doesn't carry over. That this next one is a whole new committee, a whole different ensemble, a whole different job. So that was also a lesson to learn of like, hey, just because you did this one day, the next day can be completely different. So
and after that experience, or maybe any of your other experience, did you ever have this feeling of, okay, you know what, I'm done. Like, I'm gonna give up. I'm totally finished. I've been making the semis, and then I make the finals, and then I make the finals again, and then I think I'm doing really well, and then I go to this audition where I feel like I'm about to crush it, and I get cut in the first round. So maybe you could share a little bit if that ever, if you were ever like at a rock bottom and you weren't sure if this was the right pathway at all. You were thinking about maybe switching or anything like this. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I definitely approached it the first few years of, I just need to get experience taking auditions. So I wasn't as concerned kind of with what my results were. I was like, I need to make cuts. I need to figure out how this works.
And, you know, so that was kind of my approach. Obviously, the further into it you get and the older you get, you're going, I can't do this forever. This is not going to work.
Right.
These are really expensive. It takes all of your time and energy. And yeah, so you start going, okay, like what's, you know, it's assessing a little bit of like, you know, am I on a path here to success or not? And I think the ones that hit me harder along the way were the ones where I got really close. You know, down to the finals, or, you know, situation where it's only, you know, me and a couple other people. Those were, and then didn't get it, which happened a couple of times. Those were the ones where I was like, you know, I kind of like, I don't know that I could do much better. I feel really good about how I did. And if that wasn't enough, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do from here. If I got cut right at the beginning, often it was like, yeah, I botched this or that, or my preparation was messed up, or I'd had a bad day or whatever. Like usually there was kind of a clear, like, yep, I know it happened.
Yeah.
But the ones where it was like I played 3 or more rounds and, you know, really got close, those are the ones where it was like a little harder to accept, which I think makes a lot of sense looking back on it. But I had a teacher who, like, you know, really encouraged me through that time and basically said, you know, your playing is at the level where it's going to be competitive for any of these jobs that are coming up, and you know how to prepare, and you know how to get to the right level to advance and to make the finals and things like that. It's not a guarantee that it's going to happen every time, but consistency.
Right.
And he said, now really the trick is like, you're just looking for your committee. You're looking for the group of people whose your playing is going to speak to them and appeal to them. And you know, that will be, you just have to find that match, basically. Right. And so that kind of encouraged me to say, okay, you know, then I just keep going, and like I just have to trust then that like at some point that's going to happen. And, you know, I don't know how long it'll take. I don't know at what time or place like that might happen. But basically that was just a good lesson to me of like, okay, you know, I understand that at when it gets down to the end of it, there's a few people left. Really, anybody has the skills at that point to play that job, probably.
Right.
But
I think a little bit what you're describing is this darkest before the dawn situation.
Totally.
Where, you know, it can be that overwhelming feeling of exactly what you're describing. I've given everything, you know, I'm totally gassed. I'm at the end of this marathon and, you know, I've done 18 miles and I have nothing left. How could I possibly make it this last 8 miles? And I think that the most important thing that I've taken away, and I'm sure that you feel the same way, is like, you know, if you have done 20 auditions, 25 auditions, and you haven't advanced at any of them, maybe that's a good time to reconsider the career pathway, right? Like if you're consistently going out to a very wide number of people and getting a lot of different opinions and it's not working out, it might mean that, you know, this is the famous, I think, Albert Einstein quote of like, don't judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree. You know, like you're probably working hyper hard, you're hyper talented, but you're in the wrong pathway. You know, you're in the wrong medium. So that might be a good time to make the transition and just reevaluate, like, what would be my best medium? Because clearly, like, this very specific pathway of orchestra auditions might not be, you know, for me. But I think for most of our audience here, since we're all very interested in orchestra auditions, or are in orchestras ourselves, you know, that's not so much the case. A lot of us have this strange experience where we have an advance and then a cut and then a finals and then a cut and then this other opportunity that came in the form of a music festival or just a comment from someone at an audition. I mean, I remember I auditioned for the Metropolitan Opera and I was in the semifinals and I thought, yeah, I had played this pretty solid semifinal round. And my scores from the judges were like 9.5, 9. And this was a bit unusual to have actual scores. They actually scored my rounds, right? And my scores, 9.5, 9, 8, 8.5, 9. And then I had and then like 3, 4, you know, and I didn't make it, you know? And so this is one of those things where that really made me almost feel like throwing in the towel. You know, you're just like, what on
earth? Frustrating.
Like someone thinks I could be this good. And then other people just think I'm clearly total garbage. They think I'm a 3 out of 10 after doing, you know, after being in school for 7 years and taking all these auditions. How could this possibly be? And so I think those, as you're describing, that can be one of the hardest things of all, but it just means you have to move towards the energy of the people who do believe in you and stay really resilient and find that courage to continue following what's working. And, you know, you'll get a million no's, you'll get all these rejections and all these people who think that for whatever reason that you used the wrong mallets on timpani or you used the wrong mouthpiece or whatever. And sorry, that's not our sound, you know, it's okay. All right. And then next one, you know, continue to find the people who said yes to you and chase them down. So
I like that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So thanks, Steve. So what was one of the most, another question for you, because that was my like really important sort of self-discovery is to, you know, be able to keep moving forward and find the people who think you're great. So that's sort of moving this question back to you. What was one of the most important self-discoveries that you made about grit and resilience and recommitment during, you know, your process of auditions or also maybe during the pandemic?
Yeah. I think it's not too difficult. I think a lot of us too can point to, as you kind of did, point to a specific time of like, this was a landmark moment. This was a crossroads. This was where something changed. I think that's a very common experience for all of us to have. I definitely did during my time at New World. It was after one of those experiences auditioning. It was the Atlanta Symphony, which is my hometown orchestra.
Right.
So that was a big one for me. 2 jobs open too, 2 positions open at that audition. And so it was a big one and I was really ready and I was there at the end and there was a very strange whole thing that happened, but basically a no hire and then a re-audition and kind of a lot of things happened.
Right.
And then didn't end up working out for me in the end. So that was definitely a moment of, you know, a lot of questioning and, you know, is this really going to happen? Like, you know, all the stars were aligned and it didn't happen. So maybe it's just not meant to be. A lot of those thoughts, you know, very, very natural for that to happen. But I, at that time was introduced to Tom Sherwood, who's in the Cleveland Orchestra. And he is just an amazing resource for a lot of these topics and somebody with a ton of audition experience and a ton of self-discovery experience, if I can call it that, I guess, of just, you know, always questioning things and always looking inward and trying to figure out, you know, what mentally, you know, what things he needed to do or what things he could do better to get to where he wanted to be. And so anyway, so he was a really big influence on me. And one of the main things was that he has a whole reading list of all of these books. And so I started reading a lot of these books. And so a lot of my own kind of transformations or self-discoveries came from some of the stuff that I read. And actually I have a quote from one of them. So this is a book called You'll See It When You Believe It, which I already, just the title, I was like, yeah, I need to read that. Dr. Wayne Dyer, very famous kind of psychologist, philosopher, kind of spiritual. It's very kind of all encapsulating book. But one of the things, a certain quote from that I took with me from this time, which led me to some practices and things to improve my like mental game. But the quote was, I'll just read it. It says, make an effort to be thankful for what you have and who you are each day. Do this even if you want more and dislike who you are. Being thankful upstages greediness and focuses your thoughts on abundance. The universe seems to provide abundantly when we are in a state of gratefulness. The less we need to have more, the more we seem to get. And I was like, okay. So that like, you know, and there was a lot in that book that was along those lines. And so that was like reading stuff like that and then just really contemplating on it and you know, doing some journaling and, you know, and then talking to Tom, yeah, that just sort of opened up some things where it was like, okay, I need to think about my kind of greater purpose with this field, with this pursuit. You know, am I after this just to say that I got a job in an orchestra?
Right.
Does that matter? Does it matter to me? Does it matter to someone else? I don't know.
Yeah,
You know, so that was, you know, I had to really think about a lot of that stuff. And at what came out of it was, you know, focusing more on gratitude, like he says, thankfulness, finding the things that you're grateful for, small things in your daily life, but just kind of recentering your mind in a positive direction, rather than getting sucked down into the dark side of all the negativity.
Let me
that changes a
you.
lot.
Let me interrupt you for just a second, because we have in our stream right now Sonia Croucher, who, sorry, I hope that's okay to publicly mention you, Sonia, but I want to everyone to please, if you can, check out what the amazing work that she's done on this topic, and this idea of abundance and being able to tap into positive energy is, I've never met someone who does this more effectively in my life.
Awesome.
And so I just want to, I always want to, you know, plug the people who are supporting us and who are here in, you know, making the commitment to do this sort of thing. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So please, if she wants to share her website or her information in any sort of way, you can feel free to do that, Miss Sonia.
Yeah, I can never read enough or learn enough about this kind of stuff. So yeah, Sonia, I would love to check that out. That sounds awesome.
And the main thing that you just said that I think is so important, the part of it that resonates with me the most in my personal journey is that word abundance, is that there are so many, and now I want to make this slight transition to Josh world about this company of, you know, of doing this process of building this during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Because, you know, being away from instruments and being away from the hall for basically 1.5 years for me. I mean, I can go in and do a little practicing, and I have some instruments here at home, but we're more or less all advised to be on lockdown, stay at home, wear masks. It's very, it's very restricted here in Malaysia. And so I was in this position where I needed to have this recommitment myself. Like, how am I going to stay an artist, stay a percussionist? What am I going to do about this? And so when I was thinking about how I wanted to get involved, there's just so much already out there. There's so much content. There's so many people doing what we're doing right now. There's so many people who are doing podcasts and live streams and different types of content sharing, and there's the app masterclass, and you know, and then there's YouTube. It's like just the abyss of mountains of content. How do you make any sort of meaningful contribution when it's all already there? And it's so easy to get sucked down that rabbit hole of like feeling invisible, or feeling like you're meaningless or worthless, or you have no chance to make a difference. And I have to basically every day try to remind myself that it's not that way. It's that it's in a world of total abundance, and that there are many, many people out there who are going to find something valuable in what you do. And this is so beyond just percussion. I mean, this is every field that we're in, is that if you do truly commit to this idea that there is space in the world for you, that your actions, no matter how big or small, no matter what your industry, are important. You know, you don't have to be Facebook or Google to make a difference. You know, like you can, a small act of kindness, or a small project covering a song, or you know, just going into the practice room and making an effort to improve yourself. These things really matter, like on a deep fundamental level. And it's, for me, I found it's mostly about changing myself, and that the more I try to better myself and change myself, the more I realize that other people around me react positively to that. And when you start having multiple people around something where they're reacting positively, that's when the magic starts to happen. That's when you actually get maybe what you wanted in the first place, which was that feeling of being noticed. And by the time you get there, you realize that's not important to you at all anymore. You don't care about being noticed at all. You care about your own personal mission. And so That word that you used, abundance, really, maybe about 2 years ago, really got into my bloodstream about changing the mindset about what was important. So I'm really glad you mentioned it.
That's amazing. And I would say too, like I would, I think that will, I mean, what spoke to me about, your site when you first showed it to me and we were first talking about the concepts, before the launch and getting things ready to go, was how clearly purpose driven it was, which that part is not, as you said, there's, millions and zillions of people doing what we're doing. And there's tons of music content. There's tons of percussion content already existing. But if you look at all of it, a lot of it is just there, like it's a lot of times you don't see that kind of purpose. You know what I mean? It's just kind of doing it to do it or something, or worse, to fill someone's ego up or something like that. And it's just, you can tell right away. And the interesting parallel that I would draw is back to playing music. When the way you play and the way you approach your instrument is also rooted in purpose.
Yes.
That is also communicable.
Yes.
Communicable. Yeah. It's like people can tell people can tell. And I think that is where when I was getting close but not winning, that was the bridge I needed to go over at that time.
Yes.
It was in the comment, and I should have known, because the comments were exactly along those lines that I would get. It's super clean. It's very precise. It's very accurate. It's very elegant or whatever along these lines, but it just doesn't, it doesn't move me, or I don't really hear the music when I'm listening to it, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, and I was like, well, I can't really play any better. There's not really, I'm hitting that level that I know, is because I'm advancing, I'm getting close to winning. Yeah. So that's really key. And I think that is really what I needed to do, is kind of go back to the beginning. Like, why did I start doing this? Why did I start playing? Why did I want to be in an orchestra? Like, really those fundamental questions, which with enough introspection, like led to, okay, and I think it's a possibility. And maybe you feel like this with the website too, or your own playing career, is like, when you go back to evaluate that, there is the risk that you go, yeah, I didn't actually want to do that. You realize that I you know what, being in an orchestra actually isn't for me, and I want to be a teacher. I want to play chamber music, or I want to get into recording, or whatever it may be. I think that can happen too, and when people get kind of far down a road and then look back. Oh, speaking of, I want to throw another quote out. I'm just big quote guy here.
While Stephen is looking for this quote, I do want to encourage everyone on I believe for them, guys, it's on your left side. I know for me, it's on the left side. There's a button that you can click chat. And I've seen some of you do some reactions. I saw Mitch in there doing some reactions when you were talking about Navy Band, which is awesome. But I do encourage everyone at any time, if you want to jump in on this chat and ask us questions, or if you want to share your own experience, please do get involved. We want this to be very interactive, and it's for you. I mean, this is a free stream for you guys. So please ask your questions and let us know if you're feeling anything about the stream, or if you have any comments, if there's if our mics are too hot or too low, so you like this, please jump in on the chat. So, okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Stephen Kehner, please.
Yeah. Along those lines, here's one, and this is the founder of Nike, Phil Knight, from his book called Shoe Dog. And he says, and those who urge you to never give up, charlatans. Sometimes you have to give up. Sometimes knowing when to give up, when to try something else, is genius. Giving up doesn't mean stopping. Don't ever stop.
Wow. I've never heard that quote, and it couldn't be more true. And I'm really glad that glad that I previously mentioned, like, it's okay to maybe consider a different pathway. Otherwise I would have been Mr. Charlatan. So that's like this hilarious quote.
Well, he's drawing a distinction between, saying like, hey, don't give up on your dreams, that kind of cliche. He's like, if your dream is not rooted in like a deep purpose for you, like you need to reassess and like find, kind of recalibrate that and find what the right direction is, so that you're like really fulfilling your purpose in what you're doing and not just doing it because, for some other exterior reason. So
yeah. And I would say about this that for me, this entire, like the most important nugget of information that I could give about this topic is that I truly feel, and not everyone feels this way, but I do truly feel that motivation as an entity is really overrated and overhyped. I don't think that it's all about motivating yourself to do something. I think motivation is just more like a natural chemical reaction that happens when you have found the right pathway. And so I think a lot of people are on something close or related, or maybe not. Maybe they're totally off in the wrong ballpark, in left field. And they're being told, this is how you get motivated to do stuff. This is, you got to do this to motivate yourself. You have to do 20 push-ups or do that, like whatever it is. Right. And I tend to find that, especially teaching young students, it's so clear the ones that are motivated or not. And they're not motivating themselves. They either love it or they don't. And the ones who are getting something out of it, the ones who love it and they're finding value in it, stay naturally motivated. And so I think for me, grit and resilience, it is sort of, it's important to remember that this is kind of the second level. Like the first level is making sure that you have found the right pathway. And it's vitally important. And then once you're on this right pathway, that's when what we're talking about, this grit, this resilience, like how to deal with these struggles of the rejection of like, man, and people not pushing you off your pathway. Grit and resilience is about you found your pathway. And while you're on it, a lot of people are going to try to tell you, either because they're intimidated or because they have a huge ego or because they're bullies or whatever else, they're going to try to push you off your path. And so I think when you have found your path, you know it. There's something in you, deep in your soul, like deep in the core of your being, like you have found it, and you cannot at that point let anyone push you off your path for any reason. And you'll know, I mean, you'll feel motivated. You'll wake up in the morning and be like, I'm excited to hit this next target. I'm excited to work on this goal. And for me, that was, I mean, I love playing in the orchestra, but even more than that, I knew that something like this, like building something sort of my own, like being in charge of my own construction of something, like ideating something from scratch, was something I've wanted to do for a long time. And I missed the mark by like a little bit here and there, like I tried to be a rapper. And it's like, that was similar, like I created a persona. I tried to ideate something. I was creative. I was making my own music, and it was close, but it wasn't quite right. And so there were many days I woke up feeling like a total imposter. And it's like, you don't need grit to then stay as a rapper, that's not necessarily, it's not necessarily the right thing to be focusing on. You should focus on, once you're here and like you're trying to put on, like right now, like this first live stream event, and maybe you have technical issues for 12 hours straight on a day when things aren't working, that's when grit kicks in. That's when it's like, I have to figure this out, because I'm on my mission. I know I'm on the right pathway. Grit means, you're on the right pathway, and you refuse to let anyone kick you off of it. So that's, probably those are my most important thoughts on motivation and grit and resilience. And I would really love to hear though from you, Stephen, kind of on this particular topic. Like we've talked about abundance, we've talked about gratitude, we've talked about sort of, a little bit like visualization, but maybe you could talk to us about some like specific techniques. Because, as Sonia just said here in the chat, like it's all about communication. And so we're sort of talking about the idea of grit, but maybe you could tell us like some specific things that you've done when you're up against that wall and you know, you need to push through. You're having a roadblock. You know you can get to the other side of it, but you're in a bad place and it's hard. So what are some specific things that you could share with us about that?
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it was a fairly specific moment following that one audition that didn't work out, of feeling like I'm at the end of my rope. You know, I've done everything I can do. I've taken this to its end and it hasn't panned out. What am I supposed to do next? You know, and I think, and that's when all the reading and all of that stuff kind of spawned from, you know, from that.
So reading.
So a lot of those things, you know, like, a lot of these, well, yeah, for me, it was a lot of these books, and there were definitely daily practices that I learned. I would say the main one for me was the journaling. And it was something that I got. I'm sure it had to be from Tom Sherwood. So thanks, Tom, if you ever see this. There's a lot. I mean, he had tons of suggestions, and you hear from a lot of people about meditation, visualization. Visualization was big for me, but you know, there's lots of different ways to get there. But for me, the journaling was really key, and it was every day. It was at the end of my day, before going to bed, was write down one positive thing from the day, an interaction or a thing that happened, or totally, it could be from your practicing or from music, could be completely unrelated, doesn't matter. So just one like kind of idea of positivity, one moment of positivity, write down like, oh, you know, I'm you know, bumped into somebody at the supermarket and helped them pick up their groceries that I knocked out of their hand. Anything.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
You know, somebody else was kind to you, and you just write that, oh, this person said a really nice thing to me, and that really just perked up my day or something. Yeah. And then 3 gratitudes. So just anything from the day, like, and just, it would be, I mean, could literally not even complete sentences, like beautiful sunrise this morning, you know, amazing. I was in Miami at the time, so amazing, you know, Cuban sandwich for lunch, you know, anything. Or like, concert this evening was so awesome. The band was locked in. The section sounded really good. Anything. So any range, but just from the past day, you know, those things. And that, like, I think that kept me in a positive mindset, and that was enough. You know, I didn't need to, and I was all the reading and stuff and a little bit of visualization from there. Specifically for auditions, something that was key was actually the visualization component, which was, I wish I could remember where all these things came from, man, because there's so many different sources. This one, I want to say it was Matt Howard, who we both know very well and is a total genius at a lot of this stuff, the mental game. Yeah. And he was like, if you're going in to play an audition, look up online pictures of the inside of the hall. So you can see what the stage looks like, see what the seats look like, see what the shell, just, you know, see what it looks like. Yep. And then when you're going to play your mock auditions the last few weeks before you're going to fly there and play, yes, you know, kind of close your eyes for a second right before you start playing and really picture that environment. And just for the, like, purely, you know, just for the pure goal of when you get there, you're not totally thrown off by what you're looking at. Right. Because as we know, like, if you're looking at a blank wall inside a practice room day after day, not only does it sound completely different when you get on stage and you're adjusting to that in the moment, but also you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of seats in here, and like that ceiling is really high and it's kind of dark. Like, why didn't they turn the lights up, and like all that stuff? And you're like trying to play something super challenging at the same time. Yeah. So that was huge. That was a big one for like auditions specifically. Like, and you could apply that to anything. If you're doing a competition or anything where you need to travel there and you're going to play in an unfamiliar place, like, at Google Images, you can find like anything, you know, you can totally, it's not difficult at all. And it's like, it was such a light bulb. I was like, oh, of course, I should have been doing this all along. Yeah. So that was, I would always look up the inside of the hall or wherever space that I was going to play. Obviously helps a lot. With Oregon, I had already been here before the audition. So I had subbed with the orchestra just a couple of times, but enough to know what the inside of the hall looks like. The curveball with that was that we did the prelims and semis in a church, because the orchestra here doesn't own their hall, so they couldn't reserve the hall for the whole audition.
Ooh.
So the church was like, that was a bit of a curveball. I was like, oh, okay. So luckily I live in town. So a few days before the audition, or maybe a few weeks, I drove over there and drove around. I couldn't get inside, but I was like, okay, at least I know where it is. I know what the outside look. I know where I'm going to be going. So I wasn't able to totally solve that, but still, like, that was a totally, a great thing to really have that moment right before you're doing a practice audition, like a mock, and saying like, okay, I'm going to get myself in the space of being in a big stage, and in my mind hear what that sounds like and what that feels like to be in this big empty room. See the screen, picture the screen in my head, and the committee members are behind there. So just understanding all of that and like really getting that internally. So that when you go into play, it doesn't startle you at all.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that kind of?
Absolutely. I mean, these are all fantastic things. And of course, I think some of us have heard them before, but your unique take on it is very valuable. I mean, what you're describing of like sort of being around, and if you can't be around, how do you recreate this sort of feeling of like being close to the source? And I find that to be incredibly true of a lot of different like challenges where I'm specifically thinking about this idea of being close to the source, and it's a bit of a stretch, but the other day I was learning how to sort of code some stuff for the first time, and I was coding in product reviews on the website so that people, when they buy something, if they want to leave a review, they can leave a review.
Something that we all just take for granted now, that just
sure.
should be easy.
Something that it exists in a lot of places, right? And so I want to be able to offer something like this. I'm thinking to myself about it, I'm in a roadblock. I go to code it, I go to set it all up, and it's just not working, just straight up. And it's like there's no really like explanation of why. And I'm like, so I'm looking, so my mistake was I went to like YouTube to find other people who have tried it, which seems rational, right? Like, okay, if someone else has done this, maybe I can do this. And I tried to contact like the support team, and they say, well, like, you're doing custom code. We're only going to help you with things that are like our proprietary technology and this, so I'm thinking like, okay, how do I actually get to like the source of this problem? Like, what is the actual source of the issue? And what I discovered is that you can run another program which will tell you like not the errors with like how to build product reviews, but it'll just tell you the errors with any code. It's just like, here's an error identifier, and it just highlights it red for you, so you know where to focus, you know what to look at and what to focus on, right? And once I did that, the problem was solved in like 15 minutes. It was like so simple. But sometimes what happens is like when you're focusing on maybe a very complex challenge or a bigger challenge than you're used to, it's very easy to forget that the solutions are often very simple. Nothing is usually ever hyper complicated if you know where to look. And sometimes the hardest thing to do is knowing where to look. So like your experience of doing that, of like, oh, that's going to be like a major curveball. Like, I'm not going to know what it sounds like. I'm not going to know what it looks like. I'm not going to know anything about this place. Like, what can I do? Drive there. You can drive there and look at it. Like, you just went directly to the source of any fear. Any, you had an apprehension. You had something like, ooh, I don't feel good about this all of a sudden. What could I do to make myself feel better? And so I think if you do one way to build that grit, one way to build the confidence to move through difficult challenges is to remind yourself that if you break it down into the component parts and you go to the source and you directly attack your fear, you'll see very quick results. If you're truly willing to face the fear and just say, like, I don't know, my fiance Jenny had a fear one time of jumping off of a high diving board platform into some water,
Okay.
And it's like, how do you face that fear? Like, what do you do? And it's like, all right, well, just break it down into its component parts, right? Like, the first thing you need to do is climb the ladder. And the second thing you need to do is walk to the edge of the platform. And the third thing you need to do is jump off of it. And the fourth thing you need to do is like tuck your body in to make sure that you're not going to hurt yourself. And so instead of thinking of it as like, I'm going to dive off a platform that's 30 meters high, you know, it's some crazy rock jump. Instead of thinking of all of the things at once, break it down into component parts and attack the source of, find what actually is the fear. She had no fear of climbing the ladder. She had no fear of walking to the edge. She had no fear of swimming. I mean, none of these things were a fear. It's just the jumping. So then practice the jumping, you know, go over to a shorter platform and just practice that jump. So this is very important. What you did, what you're describing is to go to the source material. And let's read. Sonia just said, this kind of analysis is really key for teachers to instill in students and often overlooked.
Totally.
Sonia does a ton of teaching and has one of the most successful flute studios in all of Malaysia. She has basically the flute studio of and so this is something that she knows a lot about, and I'm glad to hear that we're talking about this. You know, the teaching analysis, is very, very important.
I love that. What you said there, Sonia, and I think it kind of gets to, you know, we were talking about positivity, and then like we'd bring that into your, like, not just as a general idea of your, you know, purpose of your life or your career, but like bring it into your daily, you know, teaching or practice routine. And the way that kind of manifests for me was learning at some point, like the more when I'm doing really analytical practicing, I'm trying to break down problems and figure out why I'm missing a note or flubbing a rhythm or something like that. So much of it was, if I made a mistake, like getting hyper focused on that mistake. And then all of my mental cues would be, don't do that. Don't do this with your hand. Don't miss that F when you jump. Like, it's like that. And the moment that I could be like, no, do this. These are the correct notes. These are the correct rhythms. Do them. Like, play them. You know what I mean? Like, don't. And it's just a matter of focus of like, am I focusing on all the stuff that could go wrong? Or am I focusing on like doing the thing that I'm trying to do and like just playing, like just do it. And that was just, that I feel like that it was such a simple idea. I was like, oh my gosh. And how many of us as teachers, you know, okay, now like don't make sure in measure 3, like don't rush to the downbeat or what, don't blah, blah, blah. And so even in my, we were going to reference too, perfect time to reference this guy right here.
Yes.
Audition readiness guide. On the last part of it, which is I talk about how I self-evaluate, like when I'm recording myself and listening back as I'm preparing for auditions or whatever I might be doing. That is a key thing that I do, and that's in there. I talk about that. Really take the negativity, take that focus out of your evaluation. To say, I'm still very objective and very picky about, you know, but my language that I use to myself is very specific, and it's, you know, measure 4, beat 3, the, you know, 16th notes are crushed. They're too close together. Just an objective fact. That's what's happening, you know. And then instead of saying don't do that, just say like, I'll say, you know, make sure to square off the rhythm in that measure, or play a more open 16th, you know, just something positive. That's a positive trigger for my brain. The next time I'm practicing that, I'm focused on doing something instead of focused on not doing something.
That's exactly what I don't know if you saw that comment or not. It's literally what she just wrote. Focus. If you don't want to think about an apple, think about a banana rather than not thinking about an apple, right? That's exactly what you're talking about. And totally. And what we're talking about before, which Sonia's also just touched on, knowing that you can find a solution even if you don't know it yet, right? So I think there's 2 different types of problems basically that we face when we're trying to. When it comes to complex challenges, there's 2 types of them. If you want to really simplify it, really reductionist, but I think for this purpose of this exercise, it's okay. There are types of problems that have never been solved before, and there are problems that have been solved before that you're just trying to solve personally for the first time. So sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming if you accidentally place something in the second category into the first one. So an example of like a problem that's never been solved before is like Elon Musk is trying to go to Mars, right? That's like, here we have a problem that's never been solved before. And so you're looking at something that's going to take even the brightest minds with teams of thousands. It's going to take years and years of development to solve a new problem, okay? Versus my car's broken. Like this maybe it's the first time your car has been broken, but it isn't the first time this has ever happened to someone. So
the information exists to solve that already.
It can be very, very helpful. One way to also develop our resilience is to remember that other people have also struggled with this and that you're not alone. It's really easy to get in a trap in your mind of, no one's ever had this problem before. I'm all alone. Everyone has, everyone else plays perfectly and I don't. I'm the oddball. I'm the black sheep. It's like, no, man. It's, if you see people successful at it, they also had this, issue. And even things you think might be pretty rare. Again, think of abundance. There are probably hundreds or thousands of people who have gone through the exact same issue, not even like a related issue, like the exact issue, and sometimes it's not true, and you will find that if it truly is a unique problem, I faced a unique problem actually fairly recently, and it was the most difficult thing I've ever gone through in my life because it was very hard. I had no one to talk to about it. I had no one who had gone through this exact issue. And even in those moments where you have something that you feel like no one's ever gone through this exact thing, there's still, again, probably thousands of people who've tried to do something very similar or gone through something very similar. And it's very helpful to remember, again, I'll say it again, that you are not alone in the process of trying to work through a challenge, whether it's personal or professional or somewhere in between. I think that's very important to remember and to lean on the community of people that you know. And it's even more difficult when you're isolated. If you feel like you don't have a community, that can be even more challenging. And that's one of the reasons, again, that it's so important for us all to try to, within our own circles, to try to build communities around ideas that are important to us, so that when these challenges arrive, we have other people to lean on. That's sort of like those are my final thoughts on grit. I have one more question for you, Stephen, but I do want to hear maybe your final thoughts on grit and resilience and recommitment.
No, it's hard to imagine saying it better than you just did, but and I love the idea too of just I think we've really you've pulled back the curtain a little bit on the operation here and what the website is about. And I think, again, that's what spoke to me in the beginning about, coming on board and trying to be a part of it. And I think that's what will continue to speak to people, when they log on for the first time and check out what's going on and see, so I'm all about that. I think that's awesome. Since I've been doing a bunch of quotes, I'm just going to leave one more for you guys.
Please do.
As my kind of parting thoughts. Somebody you may have heard of before, named Michael Jordan.
Possibly
most of us have heard of him. He was quoted as saying, "I have missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I have lost almost 300 games, 26 times." I like that he knows exactly how many times. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed.
Yeah, a fantastic
Michael Jordan.
Yes, a fantastic quote to wrap up that portion of the talk. And now, guys, I want to move into a question and answer format here. So everyone who is in the chat, I see still Brian Kehner's here, David, Mitch, Sonia, Tom, Wei. If you guys could please ask us your questions. And Sonia's asking you, Stephen, if you could share the quotes in a follow-up email. Is that possible? Yeah. Awesome. if you guys please could ask your questions now, and it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about the scope of this class. It can be about, you know, anything that you feel like is related to the class, or just struggles in your personal life that you want some help on answering, that you feel like we could be helpful. And while you're thinking of those questions and thinking of maybe something you want to ask, I want to ask Stephen, how did you balance in going through all of this? Because we're talking about grit and resilience, recommitment. There's one type of commitment that, as we're talking about, we're all human, we're all leaning on each other. There's one type of commitment we haven't talked about, and that's the fact that during this entire process, you stayed very committed to your wife. Wife, right? And you guys now have a beautiful baby boy together, and this is not this is not easy to do. You know, to balance making sure that you're giving the proper time, the proper commitment to a personal relationship in the midst of your professional relationship and developing your career. So can you talk to us a little bit about some, you know, your personal experience and maybe some strategies, not necessarily strategies, it sounds weird for a personal relationship, but you know, the sort of things, the sort of things that you figured out that helped make that possible? Because I know in my, you know, a number of my own relationships just didn't make it through the career building process. And I do find that you're in this, you know, pretty unique spot in that way. So maybe you could share a little bit about how that worked for you.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting like point on it. And I think it's part of all of our experience as we do this, like you said, career building, as you're kind of going on your path. It's so consuming and requires so much of your energy and your time, and, you know, that it's pretty easy to just be like, I don't have the brain capacity or time to deal with a relationship. It's not there. And that's, I totally felt that way a lot. But luckily, I mean, we, you know, we had been married before I decided to start taking auditions. So that wasn't, you know, that was already kind of was set. And it was, I guess I would say that it was always we always wanted things to be balanced. So no, you know, neither person's career would take over and be, you know, the only thing that we had going on, and the other person's would just totally fall by the wayside. I wanted to make sure that we were each fulfilled in our career at all times. But I mean, just out of necessity, like, as you know better than anyone, being a musician could take you anywhere in the world at any moment, and you have no idea when that might happen. Like, you just don't know. And so what that required of Kristen was just a lot of flexibility, and especially in terms of location. Like, we had to be able to pick up and move somewhere. So the really ironic thing, and actually one of my favorite parts about this whole experience, especially getting here to where I am now, is that we actually moved to Oregon for her job.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, you know, we had done all this, and we moved to Miami when I became a New World Symphony Fellow. You know, we had moved to Boston together so that I could go to grad school there. So we had done a lot of moving, you know, for different things that I was doing. And luckily she had picked a career, you know, not luckily, she did it on purpose, picked a career that was very location flexible, so she could keep working no matter where we ended up living, which was great. But yeah, after a while of doing that, she got a new job out here at Nike, and we said, okay, I was finishing up my 1 year in Utah and wasn't sure. I wanted to keep taking auditions, but just needed basically a home base to do that from. You know, you just need to practice. You need instruments, a studio, some teachers, and I knew Michael Roberts, who was the former assistant here, and not really anyone else, just him. But it was like, okay, I know someone, you know. And for anybody out there who may be in a similar position of like, you're getting close to the end of school and you just need a home base, that would be something that I would say is like, you know, you don't need much. If you can go somewhere where, you know, we have one connection, one person to play for, one person who might be able to help you get some gigging work, whatever it may be, that's enough. You know, you can start with that. You can work with that. So that's what I did. So we came here, and so she could start that job, and I was freelancing, playing a lot of different places and things like that, which was an adjustment after having, a lot of full-time with New World, and with the Utah Symphony job was full-time work. Yeah. I also appreciated the time I was like, I can like devote more to auditions if I'm not working full-time. So I knew that was kind of a trade-off. It was like, if I, just do the freelancing and I can kind of choose when I work, then I can practice, which, when the Oregon Symphony audition came up, it was like, okay, like, I'm not going to take out-of-town gigs. I'm going to stay here for 3 months or whatever it may be and practice, every day at my home studio, and then, go take lessons from people and things like that. So that worked out really, really well. But I just love that part of it, for me, that, I find like we made a move together for her career. And that's what led us like to my audition win. It's like, I couldn't have written that any better myself,
Yeah, that's it. And that was, just a very fortunate situation, but it's just icing on the cake, because, I think it was regardless of, you guys were respecting each other's careers so much that it sort of wouldn't have mattered. It's like, she follows this opportunity, or you do, and you guys just, sort of figure out the balance between where you want to live, also balancing things like, I'm sure, cost of living and quality of life, all these, of these obvious ones. But it is very interesting. And I think most of us here on this stream might not be in this particular issue, but since it's being recorded and it'll go out, I do find it important, if you are starting out on this journey, specifically to be an orchestra musician, it's very, very important to remember that location is almost for sure not going to be up to you if your true passion is to play for an orchestra. So if you're very specific about, I want to play for an orchestra, that is something that you're going to have that trade-off of, you might not be able to decide on your timeline, who's going to retire or who's going to leave an orchestra, get another position, and what position comes open. And then even if you did have that dream orchestra, they might not like your particular playing style, that you like. And so this place that you might have thought of as your dream orchestra, it turns out it's not actually your dream way of playing and expressing yourself. So I do find that you end up in the place that you're supposed to be. That is for sure. Yeah. Like if you keep auditioning and someone says yes to you, you're probably gonna feel awesome, because most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, that panel of people who selected you really enjoy your playing. and then you go and you play, and you're probably gonna pass your trial, and it's gonna be great. And
we all get that question so much, don't we? I mean, I feel like if you have a family who's not in the orchestra business or music or whatever, or a lot of friends who don't do that type of work, it's like, oh, what's your dream job? Like, where do you see yourself? And I never really knew what to say. I don't know. I just hope I get a job. But eventually I realized that it was like, that was the answer to that question, which was important for me to internalize, was my dream job is the place where they want me there, like where my playing fits in with the orchestra, and they see that, and they choose me to be in their, like, those are the parameters, like, that's it. So I think like just acknowledging that was key.
And that's exactly how I feel about it as well. And in this idea of like balance and respecting, maybe interests outside of just your career, we have a question from Mr. Brian Kehner. Do you force yourself to take on other hobbies to ensure you do not put your mind in overdrive and get to a burnt out stage? How does the balance of stepping away from music at times help with resilience? Or just because that question isn't phrased that way, or does stepping away help with resilience?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think it's something that, especially like in music school, in that kind of world, doesn't really get talked about enough in terms of a balance and finding other outlets and things. As a lot of us experience especially in like conservatory environments, is very like, you practice, you don't do anything else. Like you practice, you know, and it's like, that's the attitude that everyone, and I don't know that that's like institutionalized or something. It's not like the dean is like, you must practice however many hours a day, but it's like just the atmosphere of everyone's there, everyone's really good. And so you're like, I have to practice all these hours in order to cut it here. So I think that we catch on to that at that stage of life. But yeah, I always liked taking extended time off, like in the summers when I wasn't at school. I always liked stepping away and, you know, just doing anything else, especially if it was teaching related, like summer music camps. Or I used to, in undergrad, I would teach high school drum lines. So it's still like totally musical, but like completely different than like playing orchestra excerpts. Like not, they're both music, but that's about all they have in common. Like it's totally different. But I love that. Like it was just a totally different world, and you know, just teaching kids how to drum, like that was really cool. But and then yeah, I always really liked doing stuff that was where I was just learning a totally new skill.
Yeah.
For instance, like just when I was living in Utah, I had never skied. So I was like, I'm in Utah, like I should learn how to ski. Like there's this whole part of this place that I can't appreciate unless I strap some skis on and like figure this out. So that, you know, I've always like pushed myself to try to like, I don't know, just learn. And I don't push myself to get good at it by any means. It's really just the exercise of like, you know, I want to learn how to do this, and that's enough. Like that's good enough. Like I don't need to go to the Olympics. Like it's fine, you know. And I know some musicians will also have that tendency of like, if they pick up another hobby, they have to do it to the extent that they learned their instrument. You know, I can't just, you know, I can't think of a good one. Like, you know, I can't just ride my bike for fun and fitness. Like I need to qualify for time trials or whatever, you know, like, or running, whatever. It could be athletic stuff or anything. Like, but it's like, we always take it to its end because that's what we've done with our instruments.
Right.
And to me, I was always like, no, like I'm good with just like learning how to do it, and that's enough. Like it got my mind off percussion for a bit, and like that's great. And I think that that was always really key for me. Not everyone functions that way, and some people don't need that break, and that's cool too. But I always did. Yeah. What about you? Did you ever step away for extended periods of time, or like, you know?
You know, I think it's something that's, as you just mentioned at the end there, it's very personal. And I don't think, you know, a lot of, when you think of the greatest athletes, for example, or you think of the greatest physicists or people in technology, I really don't think during their career forming years that they spend too much time away from their mission. And I think that's reflective of what I talked about a little bit before about making sure that you're on the right path. Is that when you're on the right path and you feel it and you know it, there's often not too many times where you feel like you need to do something else in order to recharge yourself to get back on the path. The path is almost like, I don't know if you ever played this video game Mario Kart, but it's sort of like when you're on the path, you just keep hitting boosters. You know, it's like, so the boosters are on that path. And when you're not on a great path, it's sort of like being on a road that has like a bunch of bumps and there's tacks in the road and there's nails everywhere and you keep getting flat tires. And it's like, you probably just need to choose a new road. But I will say that I always did have hobbies. I mean, for myself, I always did have hobbies. I played a ton of ultimate Frisbee. I loved playing video games. I mean, there were lots of things I enjoyed doing. But what I found was that when it came to truly getting what I wanted from my career, like when push came to shove and it was like, I want to be an orchestra musician, a lot of those things had to go away because the level's too high. There are too many people who are willing to commit everything because they don't feel like they're giving up anything. They just feel like this is exactly what I want to do. I want to play percussion or whatever. I want to do whatever, 12 hours a day, every day. Like, I think when that really hit home for me was I heard Michael Phelps say, I never take Sundays off because that's 52 more days a year that I was in the pool practicing that the other guys don't have. So I know when I hit the pool, I did 52 more workouts because I used every Sunday because I never take a day off. Now, then Michael Phelps won all, then he won all his medals, and then he can do whatever he wants. You know, it's like, so I think the answer is like, there is a time and place for hobbies, but if you're trying to do the type of career that is, it's not necessarily cumulative. Like there are many careers where you build knowledge very slowly, and it's not performance based, it's cumulative. It's like you just keep adding to your knowledge, you keep adding, you keep adding, you keep adding. And it's important to be well-rounded because it helps your knowledge fit into other things with your work that you might be doing. But when you're talking about a performance-based activity like music or
sports,
even like being a really competitive lawyer, like where you need to be out in front of the courtroom, and something where or on TV being an actor, any of these things that it's live and you need to be able to execute in the moment, or that's it, right? You have to be so focused, and that focus gets developed by building your endurance, and the endurance gets built by being very accustomed to being able to put in a tremendous amount of hours day in, day out. So I think it would be disingenuous to say that, all I ever did was percussion and that's how I got my job. Like that's for sure not true. I was doing lots of other things, but it's also like a little bit of self-awareness, like, but I'm not the principal percussionist of, name your favorite orchestra, Berlin Philharmonic, New York Philharmonic, whatever, like those. And what I have found is that the people who do end up in those positions are relentless. They're hyper focused. And if that's something you truly, not everybody wants that, like I knew that that was something I was, it's sort of sexy, like the idea of doing that job is like very alluring, but it's not necessarily, that was not my like primary mission. And I think when I was younger, I thought it was. And then I realized like, but I enjoy doing way too many other things to only be focused to get the principal job of, that particular orchestra. And maybe that'll change. Maybe 3 years from now, I'll change my mind and I'll say, you know what, now I do want to do that. And I'll get hyper focused for like a 3-year period, and I'll improve like my skills to a level where that's something that I want to do, and that's okay. Like, you're allowed to change your mind, it's like you're allowed to be flexible. And totally. And even for rapping or craft cocktail making, these are awesome comments here. Even for things that are like way off, not related to classical music basically at all, something in a completely different field. I think what you said, Stephen, is true. It's just like do them unless it's getting in the way of your mission. If it's getting in the way of your mission, you're probably on the wrong mission. That's what I would say.
One of my favorite books on this topic that I'll leave you guys, and I can also like make a little book list and quote list as well, but the book Grit by Angela Duckworth, which I reference in my blog post, which is on the site here, that she talks about in that book, like when you find your purpose, it's like a compass. So it's like it's another way of talking about like what we've kind of been saying is like, if it's pointing north, if it's correctly calibrated and it's always pointing north, it's always, like you may have a windy path that goes lots of different directions. You may go off one way and be like, that was the wrong way, and turn around and go the other way. But you are always holding this compass of like, that's keeping you guided and centered on your mission, and not, that it's not to say that there's not going to be wrong turns or mishaps or whatever.
Right.
But just that, you need to make sure that compass is calibrated off the bat.
Yeah. And guys, that's the class, that's sort of the finishing up. So if we have, Stephen, if you want to leave us with any final thoughts, or if anyone else has questions, please go ahead and ask them now. Or if you just want to shoot a message to me and Stephen so that we can see it, please enter that in the chat. But yeah, Stephen, do you have any final thoughts on the class today, or just what was this?
I would just say thank you. I would thank you guys for who came and tuned in. I appreciate you guys joining in on this, and it's kind of a new thing. We're trying to get it all figured out. So we work all the kinks out and everything, and hopefully get a nice series going and talked to lots of different players in a similar format. So appreciate you guys kind of being along for the ride with this new experience here.
Yeah, I really appreciate, and personally to you, Stephen, I really appreciate the incredible amount of enthusiasm and hard work that you have put into the platform here in the beginning days. For those of you who are unaware, Stephen has been just contributing massively to, the early success of this platform. And without him, this wouldn't have been possible. So it really means a lot to me, Stephen, that you're here doing this, both this class and everything else that you've contributed. And, we look forward to many more. We look forward to, if you're not already aware, he showed it, he gave a little preview before, but his best-selling audition readiness guide is available in our store. He has a blog post written about grit, and he has also a soft snare roll routine that is available on his artist channel, among a lot of other videos. And we look forward to his constant input of more content as it comes through. So guys, just thank you so much for being on the stream. And we really look forward to the next one.
Thanks, guys. And thanks, Josh, for setting it all up. This is great.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll see you guys next time. Take care. This was The Art of Recommitment with Stephen Kehner. Awesome. Take care, everybody.
See ya.